Good morning. It's March 14th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Corey Morgan. Hey there, Gary and Saniko. Good to see you guys on. Kicking off this week, another stupid, crazy, busy news week, and it's nuts around here too. We've been trying to move the office and having a lot of fun. For those who observe some of these things, it's not a religious observance, but it's a very important one. For people who aren't familiar with it, March 14th is also known as Steak and a BJ Day. So for some of the couples who may want to observe that, I know the price of beef is pretty high these days, but you might want to get one out there. And well, whatever you do after that is up to you. But it is important to have those regular observances to keep life fun and make sure that our beef producers are well served by lots of customers. Aside from that, this show is coming to you live every day. Just that reminder for the new viewers, the ones I haven't driven off with my references to what day it is. Every day, 11:30 Mountain Standard Time, Monday to Friday. And of course, we do specials and things like that as well. Bring on those comments. It's good to see people from all over, Monty Lake, BC, Okotoks, lots in Calgary, of course. And let's have some discourse. You know, that's the advantage of a live show. You guys can chat back and forth with each other. You can send live feedback to me, potentially my guests. I mean, I won't necessarily read out every one, but I do read them as I see them go by. And it just makes for a much more lively show, than just having canned recorded stuff like so many of the others. So I got a couple of good guests on today. I have Wildrose Independence Party leader Paul Hinman coming on. He's going to take a break. It sounds like when I was talking to him, I've worked with him on campaigns. He just works like a maniac. So he's going to come in from his phone out on the streets because he's door knocking all day today. That by-election is being held tomorrow night in Fort McMurray, Lac La Biche. So we'll get an update from Paul there, and we'll find out tomorrow night who has won up there. Then back to more UCP shenanigans. I got Jody Gateman coming on. Jody's been a very active political person for a long time with the Wildrose Party in the past, and then the UCP and a number of other areas. But she ran for a nomination, and they found an excuse, and they disqualified her recently. You probably heard some of that in the news. We're going to talk to Jody and get an idea of what happened there. Hey there, Hockey Jay from Nova Scotia. So yeah, we got a bit of an Alberta-centric thing there, Jay, but it's still all interesting politics. Hang in there, and I appreciate you coming on to watch the show. So I'm going to get on to something that's a little local, but it kind of covers a lot of things too. And this is where not every commenter is going to agree with me, but that's okay. You don't have to. But it's been over a month since Alberta dumped his vaccine passport program. Mask mandates ended province-wide 2 weeks ago. Businesses are allowed to operate at full capacity and at normal hours again. And these moves are happening across the country. Even the NDP in BC have come to realize the restrictions have to end. We get doomsayers like Rachel Notley's pet doctor, Joe Vipond, and others who predicted mayhem and overwhelmed hospitals and massive infections. They always do. And as usual, they were wrong. COVID-19 is still with us, but time and policy attempts have proven that lockdowns, mask mandates, and vaccine mandates have a negligible impact upon the pandemic at best. We still aren't done. We still aren't done overall. The federal government, they've been fighting every effort to drop their restrictions with all they have. A person still can't fly or take a train without having a vaccination. Some mandates remain for federal workers and federally regulated industries like truckers. And the border requirements are onerous and they're harming tourism significantly. These mandates aren't trivial or harmless. I mean, some people haven't been able to freely travel for years or they've been put right out of work. With all that said, we are getting closer to what could be considered normal living than we have seen in years. Politicians and medical leaders even are conceding finally that we need to begin accepting COVID-19 as being endemic and learning to live with it. And we've got ongoing weekly protests being staged in cities across the country. And I don't doubt they've helped nudge political leadership in the right direction, even though they were grudgingly pushed towards it. And those political leaders will never admit it. But it was becoming clear that people were getting upset in ever larger numbers with what was beginning to feel like interminable restrictions on their lives. And they were taking to the streets to demonstrate their ire. All that said, it's getting near time now to temper some of these protests. Most of the public are ready to move on. And if ongoing protests become a hindrance, public sentiment will turn against them quickly. I mean, the public's happy with things opening up, but they're still grumpy. And when public support's gone, the state will move in quickly and it could get ugly. And I don't want to see that. Again, I understand some restrictions remain on the federal level, and people have every right to protest those restrictions. In fact, some of them should. It's time for these protests to become more targeted, though, before they do devolve into something else. In Calgary, the protests were impressive as thousands of people gathered and marched every weekend in the Beltline area near downtown, and they still are. People were fed up with the restrictions and applauded the marches, even if they didn't join them. I thought the peaceful gatherings down there were fantastic. We're now at a tipping point, though, where people are asking, Well, what are they still protesting about? And the number of protesters at these gatherings, they're still impressive, but they're starting to wane. And now what I'm saying is maybe it's time to move locations. If the federal government's the only remaining institution maintaining restrictions, perhaps the protests should start gathering at federal offices in Calgary, like the Harry Hayes building, or City Hall, even, or the McDougall Center, where provincial government offices are located. Like, take it to the political fronts. Because right now, the weekly protests are being held in a residential area. And while I've been supportive, I can understand why some residents are starting to become tired of them. I mean, you got to see an end at some point. So what's the point in annoying innocent citizens with the protests? How is it pressuring the government in any way? If anything, it's only costing the protesters public support now. And counter-protests are starting to spring up to stir up trouble. So things could go off the rails soon. And it's clear the counter-protesters, they're just trying to instigate a violent clash. They basically baselessly continue to slander the freedom protesters as white supremacists. The counter-protesters are masked and trying their hardest to cause trouble as they block what was a peaceful, if annoying, march on 17th Avenue the last couple of weekends. Once police moved in, to get them out of the way and avoid conflict, of course, the counter-protesters have moved on to playing victim. They're practiced in this. It's the usual suspects. As protests continue and conflicts escalate, though, police are going to be forced to intervene. And this is what the counter-protesters want. I know they don't really represent most of the Beltline residents as they claim to. These counter-protesters, for the most part, are the usual Antifa-type crowd who exists simply to cause trouble. They won't stop, though. And more cellar dwellers are going to be joining their ranks as they become inspired by the potential conflict. I'm saying it's time for the freedom protesters to take the higher ground, move the protests away from the residential area and towards the government facilities where they belong. The extremists taking part in the counter-protests will probably follow, but they won't have public or police support as they try to make trouble with a peaceful group that's already demonstrated a capacity for compromise. If things continue on the course they are now, though, there's going to be a serious conflict at one of these marches soon. Somebody might get hurt, and all the public support for the protesters that they've worked so hard to gain could evaporate. This doesn't have to happen. Demonstrators can continue to gather every week and make their case on the streets. They need to accept, though, that it's time to take the event to a new area. The current course is on a dead-end trajectory, and again, I just don't want to see what was such a good thing becoming wasted if it falls apart and gets extreme. So give a little ground, guys, a little bit of compromise, and I think it'll work out better for everybody in the end. Okay, that's what I've got for my thoughts today, and I'll check in on Dave Naylor to see the news and thoughts from him for the day. Dave, how are you?
Good morning, Corey. How's life in the construction zone?
It's interesting around here. You aren't missing out on much. Yeah, as I said for viewers, we were in the middle of moving to new offices. We had some unanticipated delays, and that's why we've got Dave tuning in from home rather than his usual office seat today. So, but I had to come in. Our studio doesn't work from home.
Yeah, it sucks to be you, Corey.
It does.
So our top story at the moment is a guaranteed eye roller. It's the federal Liberals, the Environment Department, is sort of congratulating themselves. They've introduced a carbon tax that is affordable, quote unquote, affordable. Well, I don't know if you've ever filled up your gas tank in the last week or so, but it's getting more and more unaffordable, and we're only 2 weeks away from another increase in the carbon tax. So not sure if they'll be able to stay affordable for very much longer. Another interesting story on the federal government. They have a access to list compiled by consultants of 25 trusted media reporters who they can guide in the election. The name of the 25 has been censored out on access to information documents, but I think we can have a good guess on at least a couple of them, Corey. Speaking of the Beltline protest, Mayor Gondek not very happy at all. She wants to know why police aren't using the powers of bylaws to make some arrests or at least hand out some tickets. She says there's unlicensed food vendors and unlicensed merchandise sales going on, the horror, and she wants police to crack down on that. Calgary Police will be holding a press conference this afternoon at 1:30. Lots of questions to ask them, of course, after the weekend. Pierre Poilievre has put out or held a press conference today about fast-tracking immigration policies for people with the proper credentials, making doctors who move here from other countries or nurses being fast-tracked to get their licenses. As you know, sometimes these things can take years. So he's looking for a way to improve that by offering incentives to provinces. So that's what we've got up at the moment. It's an exciting day here, Corey. As you know, we've got two new staffers starting, both reporters in Ottawa. Rachel and Matthew will be our parliamentary correspondents, and they'll be busy because, as you know, Ottawa it sometimes is creating the news down there.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Whether we like it or not, they still are considered the capital of our country for now, and we have to have people there to see what's happening with us.
You bet. So we didn't hire just one; we hired two. So
Excellent.
looking forward to welcoming them on board, and people can start seeing their work any moment now.
Right on. Well, thanks for checking in, Dave, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, fingers crossed.
Well, maybe I'll just come down to your place, do the broadcast there.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Take care.
So that's kind of what we got kicking off the news this week, guys. A few things going on. As Dave pointed out, yeah, things are just in flux. We're growing like crazy. We're moving. It's funny. It's just one floor on the building, but it's a big move, when you got a number of offices and people and everything. And we had some contractor issues, and the move that was supposed to happen didn't quite happen. But it's happening. We're growing, and it's a growing pain. It's annoying today, but it's all signs of good things. And as Dave said, we had two brand new people, experienced folks coming in from Ottawa. I believe they're going to have a couple of articles going up today. This is their first day on the job. So we're going to have better national coverage. We the Western Standard, we've been covering the West very well, and we cover the center and the East as well. But having some people on the ground out that way helps us certainly broaden our news and views out there. So if you haven't subscribed already, I got to get that plug in. Get onto the westernstandardonline.com. Take out a subscription. That's some of that talk that Dave was talking about, with the preferred media groups and the ones that get subsidies and the ones that get certain news. Yeah, the liberal gang, and they've really been working harder and harder to control media. And a lot of media has rolled over and allowed themselves to be controlled. We don't. We won't. We rely on members. That means the only ones we're accountable to are you guys, to the subscribers. And we report, not always what you want to hear specifically, but that's why we got a large number of columnists and reporters. And we are bound by that, but we need you guys to keep doing it. And it's been great. That's part of why we're growing, is because we got so many subscribers. But if you haven't already, take out a subscription, $10 a month. If you use the coupon code TRIGGERED, you'll save $10 on an annual if you take it out. And it's only $99 a year for an annual membership. It's a free trial for 2 weeks. You can give it a crack. If you don't think it's worth it after 2 weeks, you can back out of it. It doesn't cost you a nickel, and you're all cool. But if you want to stick with it, and 95% of the people do after the trial, use that coupon code TRIGGERED. You might as well save a few bucks, maybe buy a steak with it or something, and put it to good use. So please, thank you all who have sponsored us so far, and we appreciate that. So yeah, again, back to what Dave was talking about. And then part of why I start with the rant, I'm just concerned with the ongoing protests. And I've been down there. The people are peaceful. They're fantastic. The atmosphere is very happy and forward thinking and jubilant. I was impressed. Like the earlier protests a year and a half ago, I went and checked them out, and they weren't. They were a little kooky and often angry, and they certainly had evolved into something much bigger and nicer. But now it's, everything kind of often goes on a curve, and they've hit a point now. People are losing interest to a degree because, again, most of the mandates are dropped, and I know there's federal ones, and I know there's still a problem. But that general tipping point of getting people to come out is harder now. And these counter protesters are feeling emboldened. And you watched them the other day. Oh, they're all whining. They were told by the police over and over again, back up. Because what was happening, for those who don't watch the Calgary things, they have a big protest with thousands of them. And they get together in a park. And then they do a march. And they march through some streets and up some streets and back around and end up back in the park. I think the march takes about an hour. Typically, like I've attended them, and I didn't walk the whole march, but when they would march by, it takes about 15 minutes for that many people to walk by, and they fill a whole street. So these counter protesters went down on 17th Avenue, Calgary. There was about 90 of them, 100 of them, and they stood and they blocked the road. They didn't allow the march to continue past them. So this came to a standoff, and they were standing still and here's some of the irony, because they say they're counter protesting because these protesters are causing so much disruption down there. Of course, by completely stopping it up for 45 minutes or an hour as opposed to 15 minutes isn't exactly helping the situation, but that's what they went out to do. And they were aggressive, and they were masked. It's the usual ones. The police kept asking them, move aside so these guys can march by, move aside. They wouldn't move aside. So the police did eventually push them aside, and not, Yeah, there was a couple of they took bikes and they pushed. They used those bikes. We saw that in Ottawa too. It's ironic, It depends. So the police are moving protesters. They use similar techniques in other areas, no matter what side the protest is on. Counter protesters have gone wild. Of course, they're howling. They're victims. They feel terrible. Bummer, but they're not going to stop. And these guys and they're whining, of course, and it's the defund the police bunch too. And they'll say we got to defund them. The police are bad. I mean, the police kept these two groups from coming together. And as I said, these protests, I've gone to them. They've always been peaceful. They've been good people, loving, forward thinking. It's an unusual atmosphere for a protest. But things can get stirred up. Tempers can get heated and people can get frustrated. When you've got thousands being held up by dozens, and if you actually let those two groups come together, somebody might lose their temper and things could go badly. I used an analogy with somebody on Twitter. Oh, so you're saying these guys are violent? No, I'm not. I'm saying that if you're stupid, things can happen. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stupid people out there. The analogy I use is bees. They're totally harmless. Walk by a beehive, a set of hives. Side note, by the way, Jane and I are getting into beekeeping this summer. This should lead to some good stories as I come in covered in stings every day. But either way, bees are typically harmless. You can walk right by the hive, whatever. As long as you're not bothering them, they won't do a thing to you. You go shake that hive up, though, you're going to get stung. So just don't stir them up. It doesn't mean the bees were dangerous. It means you took safe bees and turned them dangerous. So the police, they know that. They do conflict resolution. They're not perfect, but they have common sense, and they know we can't let these two groups get together like this, or we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a conflict. Maybe somebody will get hurt. So they separated them, and it took pushing. But it's going to get worse, guys. It's going to get worse. This weekend, more people now are going to be upset, and they're going to be coming out on one side. More people are going to be upset, and they're coming out on the other side. And again, I worry for what it's going to lead to. And if it ends with a bunch of violence and fighting and things like that, and we'll see the video, I mean, the people pro-freedom protesting are going to have lost their messaging. They will not, they've done so much great work. They've made strides. So all I'm saying is maybe examine how you can take some of that pressure off. And that's where maybe gathering at the Harry Hayes building downtown every weekend, or the McDougall Center. There's a lot of areas where you can gather, and it doesn't drive the local residents who have to live down there is nuts. Doesn't put the pressure on citizens who are living down there, and you still make your point, because the protest is important and your right's important. It should be valued. I'm just worried with where it's going to go. I don't want to see it go badly. I'm going to speak very briefly to our other sponsor. Then I'm going to bring our guest in because I think I see him in the lobby shivering out there, but I do got to talk about our sponsors before I pull them in here. So quickly, I will mention the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been a sponsor for us for quite some time, and they're really good. Their name says what they are. If you enjoy firearms, whether you're a hunter, a collector, a target shooter, it's up to you, whatever you like. It's a legal thing to do. It has to remain a legal thing to do, but it won't remain a legal thing to do if you don't stand up for yourself. You got to push back for your rights. And the Canada Shooting Sports Association is doing that. They have legal challenges out on a number of fronts on behalf of firearm owners, and they need your membership to make sure they can keep doing that. So check them out. It's cssa-cila.org, and take out a membership with them. It's a frog and water thing. They're constantly taking your property away, your rights away. They're reclassifying things. These guys are standing up for you, and they need your help to keep doing it. Plus, they got a lot of other resources too, just videos on, say, firearm use and areas where there's going to be trade shows. So check them out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and they are a good group and worthy of your support. Okay, let's bring Paul in. He's standing out there, and I see the snowflakes are flying. So we've got Paul Hinman from the by-election trail up in Fort McMurray, Lac La Biche. How you doing, Paul?
Well, it's a brisky, cool day up here, but it's awesome. I mean, there's just nothing more enjoyable than meeting people at the door and talking about the importance of this by-election and how Trudeau and Rachel Notley want to tax our carbon, and they want to shut down our oil sands. And then you got Brian Jean and Jason Kenney, who want to meet the Paris carbon net zero 2050. And these people up here get it. They realize that, you know what, that's not in our interest, and they're speaking out against it. And it's just, like I say, it's awesome talking to them at the door.
Yeah, well, I know you're a tireless door knocker. I've worked on campaigns with you before. You wear me out going door to door, but I mean, that's the way you can really connect with people. That's the only way. I mean, you can't beat getting one-on-one with a candidate and talking about things. So you've been at it for a couple of months up there now, have you?
Just a little over 3 months now, Corey. It's amazing. We've got, close to, well over 450 people with lawn signs out that are supporting us. And like I say, if we had time to continue to talk to people door to door, there's overwhelming support for what we're wanting to protect here in Fort McMurray in Alberta. This is our crown jewel, and this is I say this is ground zero against carbon net zero. These people understand that.
Yeah. So in general, I mean, just to give people a timeline, even for some people who are watching from up there, by-elections can sometimes really slide under the radar. People forget they're happening. The voting day is tomorrow, and I believe the cutoff will be 8 o'clock.
That is correct. 8 p.m. and go to elections.ab.ca to find your designated voting place, because you have to go to your proper one. Advanced polls, they can go anywhere. But no, it is. That's the problem. The number of people I still knock at the door. Oh, I've seen the signs up. I didn't realize. Why are we having a by-election? And people like to live their lives outside of government. And how we're political wonks and we're all tuned in and think the rest of the world is. But they're not. And again, many of them are frustrated. And elections too often are about voting someone out. In 2015, it was voting Jim Prentice out. In 2019, it's about voting Rachel Notley. In 2023, it's going to be able to where you can actually vote for something you believe in. Vote for Wildrose. Vote for principles. Vote for a government that's going to protect your constitutional rights of life, liberty, property. And it just resonates. People understand the carbon tax only hurts us. It's a wealth transfer. It's not doing anybody any good here in Fort McMurray, let alone Alberta or the rest of Canada.
So with just getting on to things, I mean, people tend to vote for change, and as you said, you can send a message with voting for you and let them know that they want something different. Ironically, and I know you don't wish that, but harder times help inspire people to change. The energy prices are very high. I imagine things are kind of starting to boom a little bit up there as they try to get the gears turning again. Is that having an impact on things?
Well, up here it's a little bit different in Fort McMurray because they're such big organizations. I mean, Suncor cut back their capital spending this year 10% a year ago. I talked to an individual that's a subcontractor out there. He was just sick last Friday. He had to let 17 people go, and he said it was the worst thing he had to do in his life after 2 years of COVID and all of the problems. And he is very much for it. Says, we got to get you in there, Paul. We got to change the narrative. This attack on Fort McMurray is hurting them big time. Housing prices are hurting here. And like I say, 17 people lost their jobs last week up here in the oil and gas industry. And it doesn't turn around as fast as drilling does, and again, the pipeline building has been slowed to a halt pretty much. It's still hurting here, but people are optimistic that we can and will turn it around.
Yeah, well, and that is some people, things people have to realize if they haven't worked in the field much or understand. I mean, conventional oil and gas drilling, even then the regulations are pretty onerous and it takes a while. You can't just pop out there and spud in and get something into production and get it into market without a whole bunch of process. But oil sands, I mean, that's large, long-term type of investment. So you can't move on a dime whether stopping or starting. And we're having trouble raising capital in Canada because we're not really a trustworthy market to invest in right now.
100%. Trudeau has sent the virtue signaling to the world. It seems like Toronto and the bankers are the same thing. They're not wanting to loan to our oil and gas investors. They're so worried about the ESG, the environmental, the social, and the governance part of things. And yet we look at the crisis in the world. And is there anything more important after our food than energy security? And, if Trudeau had any brains in his head about the importance of it, he would have said, we're going to get Energy East going. We're going to talk to Biden, and we realize that we need energy security. To be buying, conflict oil is just crazy. And that's what the people up here, they shake their head. Like, how do we have political leaders, and even Jason Kenney, failing to stand up for us in a significant way, using the notwithstanding clause, actually doing something rather than sending a letter or saying, I disagree. I mean, even Legault in Quebec, he said when the Emergency Act came out, no, we're not going to have that here in Quebec. We'll look after our own. And our premier has just been pathetic when it comes to actually standing up and saying no. He's just folded like a cheap card table every time Quebec's interfered, or Quebec and Ottawa's interfered in our business here in Alberta. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, and that's been a disappointment for a lot of us on a lot of levels. I mean, the Fair Deal panel was supposed to address a whole bunch of these things, and they traveled around with their show and their question and answer, and now it's been years and nothing's been done, not a single thing. So I guess it was just a bait and switch.
Oh, that's I don't think there was anybody that was as excited as I was when Jason got in there and thought, wow, we got someone who gets it. He actually knows the talk, but boy, he's never done the walk. And what a flip-flop. I mean, if this hasn't been the biggest disappointment for conservative voters, and that's why I say it's exciting to be out here representing the Wildrose Independence Party. People are excited about it. The legacy parties have let us down. The corruption and the decision making has just been so disappointing to so many people, and they realize we need to have something different. But boy, you got to go door to door to let people realize it. And that's what I say. There's nothing more valuable than door time. And I hope we've had enough time, but we'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah, and just like the by-election you're in is kind of unique. It's quite different. I mean, the UCP candidate is actually the strongest anti-UCP candidate, at least as far as the leadership goes with Jason Kenney. Brian Jean is based his whole campaign on basically being I want to get in there so I can be a thorn in Kenney's butt and hopefully knock him out of office, which holds some appeal to some people, but lacks some depth, I think, in some other areas.
Well,
in my view.
Corey, it was pathetic, Corey. At the one forum, all he kept doing every time was to say, buy a UCP membership and come with me to Red Deer. Like, his campaign has been to oust Jason Kenney. But I have to say, like, first of all, okay, are you going to win Fort Mac? And then the bigger one is do you really think that you can win a leadership review? And then can you win the leadership race? I mean, his arrogance is quite stunning to me, that he thinks that he's just the heir elect and we just got to knock this person off. And the biggest question that lots of Fort Macs are asking him, is he going to be a 3 times quitter? If he loses any of these, he's not going to stick around. It's in it for Brian Jean. He's not worried about Fort McMurray. He's not worried about Alberta. He's worried about his career and getting his little moment on the grandstand, it seemed like. But he didn't even show up for the last forum up here, and I don't know. It's been disappointing to see. And again, he keeps saying that we got to support the Paris Accord, and these things just aren't true. We got to stand up, say no more. Got to say no to Ottawa, no to the Paris Accord, no to carbon tax. And they all say no to carbon tax, but yet they continue and carry it on, saying, well, we got to have this virtue signaling to the world when we're a world-class organization and operation up here, and the world needs more Alberta oil and gas, not less. They need more Alberta energy. They need more of our beef, our protein, and yet these people are failing to stand up for our core industries here, and it has a domino effect. If we want to have the robust education and healthcare that we need, we have to have a robust economy, and that starts with our oil sands. It's our crown jewel, and to throw this under the bus to virtue signal to the world, it's plain wrong. People in Fort McMurray, like the bitch, got to get out and vote no to Justin Trudeau, vote no to Jason Kenney, and vote yes for Alberta and our oil sands and our oil and gas industry and beef.
So just to clarify some stuff before I let you get back onto those doors, there was an article came out recently. I guess you talked, and that's something you're prone to. You're a straight shooter, and you talked about the political nuts and bolts and the amount of numbers required in order to win. Whereas potentially, I mean, the winner of this race could come in with 30-some%. That's just the nature of the first past the post system. But some people interpreted that as you conceding defeat, that you got low support. But I imagine what you're saying is anybody could take this, get out and vote. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming number of voters.
It's always disappointing the way the media can twist things. And I was asked, what percentage of the votes do you need to win? Well, it's 35%. I mean, historically, the Conservatives here got between 65 and 70%. The NDP 25 to 30%. I don't see their votes going up. So that 35% of the voters, we should win this hands down, just because of the sheer numbers. But the real question is, in any by-election, is who's motivated. And I have to say that as long as we've been door knocking, and we've got close to 500, if not more, 500 lawn signs, that's not enough. And we've talked to thousands of people, but are they motivated tomorrow to go out? Lots of these people are working, and their shift work doesn't get there. So it's anybody's race tomorrow. This is kind of like those outdoor survival races, that the endurance races. We're running to the end, and when we get there tomorrow night, we're going to find out how we did and whether the people were motivated to get out, and if we talk to enough people.
Yeah, well, by-elections are tough and unpredictable animals. That's what makes them interesting to watch anyways, if nothing else as well. Before I let you go, where can people find in this last while where your campaign site is and what you're up to? Have you got any events happening tonight, or you're just going to be hammering doors, I imagine, eh?
We're just going to be hammering doors and pamphlet dropping. We've got be back up in Gregoire later this afternoon. I've been in Thickwood this morning. I'm going over to Woodlands here next. We're just kind of jump shooting and get up to Abbotsford probably too, and even we'll get up to Beacon Hill here, and we'll just be dropping off in each of the communities, and got a good team throwing out our brochures for the last day, and we're just excited to be here and give people an actual choice they believe in. Because so many say, you know what, I didn't even know I was going to vote. I didn't know, you know, the best of the worst isn't good enough to motivate them to get out to vote. So who knows, Corey, but it's just been exciting to be here to give people an option to choose something they believe in. And Wildrose, look us up, choosewildrose.com. Look us up, and you'll be excited to realize what we're actually standing for. And we're not a legacy party. We're out there for you. You're the masters. We got recall. You can throw us out. Don't have to put up with a Wildrose candidate for 4 years just because they get elected on elected day.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming in to join me. I'll let you get back to those doors and start warming up again. It looks like it's still winter up there. We're looking at 10 degrees today. So
I keep hearing that. You get climatized, though. You know, to me, this is a beautiful day. If the wind was a little more brisk, it would be tough. But no, this is a beautiful day. It's refreshing to be out here. And again, there's nothing warmer than talking to people at the door.
Right on. Well, we'll be watching with interest tomorrow night, Paul. Good luck, and I'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Corey. Take care. Appreciate being on.
Thanks. So again, that was Paul Hinman, and you know, I can't remind people enough. So that's Fort McMurray, Lac La Biche. Like these by-elections can really be easy to forget or not even notice. Or if people have been in for 2 weeks and out for 3 weeks, that sort of thing, might not even notice the signs. So if you live up there, whether it's Paul or wherever you want to go, it's important to take part in these things. Check it out. You know, go to Elections Alberta. They'll give details of where you can vote, what your station is, what you need, and requirements. You know, by-elections are really important. I mean, they get underrated in some ways, but they give you an electoral snapshot between general elections. It gives the voters a chance to speak up and share their thoughts. You know, if Jason Kenney had been doing fantastic and great, we wouldn't even be glancing at this by-election because it would just be a runaway for the UCP to get in there. As Paul demonstrated in the past in Calgary-Glenmore, though, when the Stelmach government was getting soft, they got to watch their flank because Paul won Calgary-Glenmore in an upset by-election victory, the same way he's working up in Fort Mac right now, just by hammering and door knocking and him with a lot of volunteers working really hard. So don't underestimate what might happen tomorrow night. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to get interest. It's tough to get people out to vote. But I know they've been working really hard, and anything can happen. So it's going to be something well worth watching. And I mean, I'm trying not to take sides. I'm an opinion columnist, though. I'm allowed to put those things out. If I were a Fort Mac person at this point, I would vote Wildrose Independence for a couple of reasons. One, because I've known Paul for a long time, and he's a principled man, which is just very important. It doesn't matter which party a person's with. If they got principles, it's really critical. The other part is it's just a by-election, as I said, is that opportunity to vote and send a message to the government. So you want some change. You're not happy with the status quo. It's a safe way to do it. It's not like you're going to put Rachel Notley in by putting a different person in up in Fort McMurray in a by-election. And also just showing the more turnout you can in any election, particularly a by-election, shows that the electorate's engaged a bit. It shows you're paying attention and that you're taking part, and that the government or up-and-comers should also be paying attention to you out there. The worst thing we ever do to ourselves is apathy and not paying attention and taking part in these votes when we get those chances. It doesn't seem like it's important, but it really is. There's my lecturing and nagging for the day, but it's important as a political weenie to put that out there. And I'm sure we got a few viewers from up that way. Let's see. I'm going to talk about a sponsor really quickly here before I get on to some news items to talk about before we get on to Jody Gaitman. And that is Bitcoin Well. I usually get to them earlier in the show, but they've been a really good sponsor. And they're offering a really good service. You know, we've got the times you can't feel safe with your money. The government reached out, they snatched it, they took it, they held people's bank accounts, they put people on long-term blacklists. It's insane. You never would have thought this would be coming. Bitcoin Well helps you explore the world of digital currencies. These guys will lead you into it because, I mean, okay, you're considering getting into that. You don't like the regular banks, you don't like regular currencies, but you're not sure. I mean, there's so many different ones out there. How do you get your wallet set up? How do you keep it secure? These are the guys. They're a Western Canadian company. They're based out here. You can get one-on-one service, white glove, like with a real person right there, and walk you through on how you get involved in digital currencies. And if you're outside of the Western cities, they'll do one-on-one service on a Zoom meeting. I mean, it's a real person on the other end. They'll just send you some PDF file and say, read the directions and move ahead. And the important thing is they're non-custodial, which means you always have control of your money. They're not a service because people worry about scams and things. Well, these guys are like the middleman. They're a facilitator. They help you buy the Bitcoin, but they never have your Bitcoin. It's always yours. And that's really important. That's how you stay safe. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com, and take control of your wealth. So, yes, I'm going to have Jody Gaitman coming on in a little while. She got disqualified, as I said, as a UCP nomination candidate on what I'll say are very shaky ground. I served with Jody on the Wildrose board in the past with the Wildrose party, not the incarnation that Paul's leading now, which is the Wildrose Independence Party. I know we make things confusing, but the old Wildrose party back with Danielle Smith, and Paul was a part of that too, of course, and that's Jody's a very well-established political person. If she could serve in those sorts of profile roles, yet suddenly be ineligible to be a nomination candidate, that doesn't really pass the smell test very well at all. Actually, it stinks. It stinks a lot. So we saw that. We saw that with Tim Hoven as well, because he was challenging Jason Nixon in the Rocky Mountain House. Nominations are some of the, if you want to see, unfortunately, some of the dirtiest of politics that typically goes on, the worst of insider play and pressures. Nomination races are where they happen. I mean, theoretically, they're supposed to be your most important democratic exercise at the grassroots level. That's where the members living in a riding choose who's going to represent them. That's where they go out and have the opportunity to say, yes, I want this person to run on my behalf in the election for this party. But unfortunately, unscrupulous party staffers and leaders and others sometimes feel that it's important to control these races rather than let them happen. They don't want to see democracy. They don't trust their own members with democracy. That's the part that gets most insulting when they mess with nomination races, is what they're saying is, you members aren't smart enough to distinguish between what's a good candidate or not a good candidate, so we're going to disqualify the ones we feel are inappropriate before you even get the chance. That's not democracy at all. It's quite the contrary. It's completely the opposite. And it happens all the time, and we've seen it happening again. And we've just got turmoil in that UCP right now. I'm going to talk about a few news items before we get on to Ms. Gaitman, though. And what's this? Federal consultants. Yes, this is, getting back to media too and getting your story. Dave mentioned this, and there's a story on the Western Standard for it. Federal consultants compiled a list of 25 reliable journalists, and I'll say reliable, in those air quotes, to be instructed on the correct way to cover general elections. According to access to information records, the consultants were led by, of course, a Toronto Star executive, the Red Star, and they wouldn't comment. Real transparency. The names of the reporters and the approved newsrooms were censored. The Department of Canadian Heritage withheld records for 3 years under the Access Information Act. So this has been going on for years, and they've been hiding it. Approved media named in a program aimed at organizing Canadian outlets to participate in a network to address misinformation. Wow. Guys, it's not the role of the government to pick and choose which media outlets are approved or official or trustworthy. It's not their job. You know exactly what a government is going to do. And it doesn't matter which party even. They're going to pick news organizations that are favorable to themselves. It's pure self-interest. And that's what they're doing. This Liberal Party has worked so hard on controlling information, on controlling media on every level, whether it's pouring more money into that rotten old CBC, the $600 million slush fund to other media and broadcasters, the ongoing subsidies and talks that they're giving out. This is terribly dangerous. This is not good, people. This, again, I'm self-serving. Sure, I'm biased, but this is why the Western Standard is important. And it's not just us. I'll name the other alternative ones. Post-Millennial, True North Energy with Candace, Rebel Media, Epoch Times. These guys are all important because they aren't under the thumb of government. Because once the government gets you dependent on them as a media organization, whether it's for direct subsidies, which is often the case, or this as well, where you're approved. If you're not approved, what does that mean? That means you get shut out of some press conferences. Does it mean you don't get certain information that other outlets get? So, in the same sense, they can still control and strangle you and make you dependent upon them as a media organization. And of course, once you're dependent on them, you really have a huge disincentive to ever critically report on government. And it's so important for media to always have the ability to critically report on government. And the Liberals fight this tooth and nail. This should set off alarm bells in this country. There's so many alarm bells going on all the time. So, what's some of the more stuff of the story? A critical first step in this initiative is to introduce a broad network of journalists, civil society leaders, where they'll pick those out of, and media executives to the issues surrounding misinformation, the history and implications it's had on previous elections, and the best practices for countering it. Wow. So you'll get your plums, your preferred media sources, and the heads of them and the executives of them, and these other civil society leaders, which I guess basically means liberals, and they will pick and choose who can properly share information with you. This is not good. Let's see. Sent a memo to the Democracy Monitor by the Public Policy Forum. This Public Policy Forum based in Ottawa received a total of $2.5 million in federal subsidies to manage a digital democracy project that expires in 2023. This is another area the government's pouring your money out to feed you propaganda, guys. And they are working, with C11 and other bills to shut down independent media, and they're busy pumping up this crap and dying legacy media with your tax dollars. And unfortunately, it leads to you getting screwed. You're getting incomplete information. And then, of course, information is everything. I've talked about that in the past. Somebody, a commenter, Pamela Jones-Kenny, saying our own Pravda media. Yeah, basically. And Pravda, for those who don't know, is Russian for truth. It's something of an irony. I've talked about that before. I did have a good opportunity in my young life to travel to the Soviet Union and back in the 80s when it was still the Soviet Union. And yeah, Pravda was there. That was it. It was propaganda everywhere, from the airport where you had brochures all the way along the walls with all of these pamphlets in English, because they wanted to get the people who are coming from other countries and everything too. But how terrible the Americans were, and nuclear testing, and how great the Soviet Union was. I mean, there are pictures of Lenin everywhere. I'm sure we're going to start seeing Trudeau statues going up. Maybe not so much in the West. I'm certain that it probably wouldn't last very well, but where this big brother propaganda, big government pushing information trend we got is continuing, and it's getting ugly. I mean, and here's the BS and doublespeak coming out. Dave talked about that in the news update. Canada has proven it can collect a carbon tax that keeps life affordable, said the Department of Environment. Oh, we'll take more of your money away, basing it on adding to the cost of something that's essential to you, like energy, gasoline, fertilizers, things like that. Yet it's supposedly going to make life more affordable. So on April 1st, yeah, the government's raising federal taxes. You're going to get another 12 cents a liter on the gas, by the way. So just a couple of weeks, guys, another 12 cents a liter. And the government, in doublespeak, is saying, we're keeping life affordable for you. Wow. No wonder they have to buy media. Because, I mean, you have to get a good mouthful of money to keep from spitting back when that kind of BS is being fed to you by government departments. I mean, they're saying, cold is hot, hot is cold, war is peace. It's getting sick. It's that bad. And they say that Canada has proven that carbon pricing can be done in a manner that keeps life affordable. Where do you get this crap? I mean, BC's had a carbon tax for years. And there's two problems with theirs. For one, of course, it's cost them a whole whack of money. BC is one of the most expensive places in Canada to live, and their carbon tax is a big chunk of that. The other thing is, it didn't reduce emissions. If it doesn't work, it's just a tax grab. And it didn't. BC's emissions have not gone down a bit. Even though having the first carbon tax scheme in all of Canada, it didn't work. So why on earth should we carry on? But we've got government departments telling us somehow, that as they raise your prices for energy on every level, making life more affordable. How are we supposed to believe these guys? They're insane. But either way, that was a notation, and at the end of it, it said, that's why the government of Canada introduced a price on carbon. They're liars. That's another thing to point out. I mean, they'd capped the tax at 12 cents on a promise it was never going to increase. That was years ago. Remember the old ditzy Catherine McKenna, environment minister? Well, yeah, we're not going to go beyond there. I'm probably doing a terrible imitation of her voice, but she was just nails on a chalkboard, that one. I mean, she was really, you could see why Trudeau and her bonded quite well. I'm sure they could trade crayons from the boxes when they're coloring between cabinet meetings. But she promised, it's not going up. She told him in 2019, absolutely, it is not going up. The plan is not to increase the price after 2022. This is her exact words. That's exactly what we said we'd do. But she lied. The government lied. They do that. They're lying to us now, and they're raising it in April. Right now, when you can barely get to work and back with the fuel prices as it is, barely heat the house. Well, they're going to add to that, and they're going to smile at you, and they're telling you, we're making life more affordable. And they won't allow people to dig in and question them because they're too busy trying to control the media. They want to make sure we don't report on that sort of thing. We do have more reports coming out. Here's another one with a federal ban on 6 types of single-use plastics. But there's a new report. Independent researchers, these are the ones they hate, independent ones, as opposed to government ones. The most commonly discarded plastic is not covered by their ban. I mean, that's where the problem is. The study indicated Canadian single-use plastic measures are insufficient Peer-reviewed study from the Marine Pollution Bulletin. Let's see here. So, I mean, they banned straws, of course, stir sticks, six-pack rings, grocery bags. You know, these are things we see all the time. They're very visible. It does feel wasteful when you only use it once and chuck it. That's what a lot of it is virtue signaling. Though we are not out of landfill space. That's room for a whole other show. We got lots and lots of landfill space. We don't want garbage. Nobody likes seeing plastic bags blowing around the roads. Nobody likes to see the oceans full of plastic and crap. But when you look at the per square mile in landfills and the way they work, North America is nowhere close to running out of room. We can bury that stuff, guys, and it doesn't bother things, whether they like to admit it or not. So either way, the things they ban aren't going to make a bloody difference. And then the ones that are causing actually more problems, they didn't ban those. So wrappers, I mean, that's the bulk of plastic we see, wrapping, packaging, things like that. That's not banned. And bottle caps, those things, you know, can't recycle them, can't do anything. They didn't ban those. I'm not saying they should ban more. It's just saying their policy stinks. They go after the low-hanging fruit. They go after feel-good things they think, well, they don't care about the environment. They don't really. They want to make sure that people think they care about the environment. They want to make sure people think they're doing something. So they put out things like that. People see drinking box straws. People see the plastic cutlery. They don't think about the cap off of their pop that they just threw away. Yeah, so it's a panel saying Walmart's stopping all plastic bags in stores in April. And I mean, those recycled bags. I mean, there's also been shown if you're taking your bag back and forth, I mean, if you want to meticulously clean it and so on, it'll work, but it's a pain in the butt. And there's a lot of problems. They get dirty, other things like that. Plastic is so thin. It's a clean sort of thing. But they're going to ban them because it makes people feel better. How about the end of plastic straws, though? I mean, where was I? It was Wendy's the other day. Grabbed a meal in that rotten paper straw, and I drank fast. That pop went down, but still that thing fell apart before I got halfway through. I know it's not ending the world because I had to use a damn paper straw. These things are annoyances, and these stupid virtue signaling things aren't doing a damn thing to save the environment. They're just making politicians feel good about themselves, as always, at our expense. And speaking of one more, I'll end off before I bring Jody on here. What's the name of that bar now? Oh, I'm forgetting it. There's a bar on 17th Avenue, and I just wrote about it. I was tweeting about it. I get the weirdest brain farts at times. They were virtue signaling when the vaccine mandates were taken away, and you didn't have to show your passport to get into the bar. Crown and Anchor on 17th, kind of a hipster bar there down there. And they said, we're going to keep it on because our customers feel it's more important to check everybody for vaccines, even if, because they'll feel unsafe. And we'll actually do better for ourselves because people feel safer and they can come in and get their vaccine passports. So screw you, Alberta. We're going to keep asking for that. And our customers have all stood up and said they're going to support us through this. There's even one doctor who tweeted, there we go, Bridget. Yeah, Ship and Anchor. Thanks. And doctor said, I'll buy 100 beers for every person who shows up with their vaccination past that point. Oh, that's nice of her. They quietly got rid of it. It didn't even make it 3 weeks. I owned a pub for 5 years. I know it's a tough business. It's a business with a 5% margin. And I think the managers of the Ship and Anchor were drinking too much of their own toilet water, listening to their own hipster customers and believing them when they say, oh, we'll support you. No, they won't. They're cheap and they're fickle. And what would happen if you got 6 people together, and even if 5 of them said, we want to go to the Ship and Anchor, but one of them says, well, I don't have a vax passport. Guess what? All 6 of them will go somewhere else. It was just bad business. And hey, it's their choice. It's their choice as a business. I think they have the right to ask for vaccinations today if they want to continue to be stupid. But they got rid of it 2 weeks ago because it didn't last. It didn't make it. It's like those no-tip businesses too. When they try it in restaurants, always fails. Not usually fails, always fails. Living wage restaurants, they've done that all over North America. I've been tracking those because, again, as a bar owner, I watch these guys virtue signaling, oh, you're going to pay a living wage. And again, the hipsters, oh, yes, we'll patronize. No, when they see a $25 cheeseburger, they go somewhere else. And the living wage thing goes down the toilet. It stops. It's virtue signaling. It's crap. It's bad business. It doesn't work. And the Ship and Anchor did it to themselves. So I have little pity for them. Still, they're small business owners. I hope they do fine. I don't really care down to this point. But I like to point out those examples because the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, Deborah Yedlin, was also saying similar stupidity, saying that businesses are actually better in having vaccine mandates and it actually draws more people in than without. That's as stupid as the government when they're telling us that carbon taxes make life more affordable. This is the pap they feed us. We got to stop eating it. All right, I'm ranted out. I'm going to bring our guest in here, Jody Gaitman. I see her in the lobby. I talked a little bit about it before, but maybe we'll get Jody to kind of explain what happened down there. So let's pop her in here. Hey, Jody, how you doing out there?
Good morning. How you doing, Corey?
Good to see you. So I kind of framed it up a bit before you got into the lobby, but we'll give a bit of background on what happened. Which constituency, actually, I didn't write that down. Is it Little Bow you were looking for the nomination in?
So Little Bow doesn't exist anymore. When the NDP redrew the constituencies, it's now Cardston, Siksika, and Little Bow
Okay.
just disappeared.
That's why I ask. I need to keep up with things because I know you live down there. I think you were in Little Bow Turf at one time.
Yes, was in Little Bow, correct.
Okay, and so you've been, give a bit more background. I said to others, I mean, we were on the board in the Wildrose together many years ago. You've been politically active for a long time. If I thought you were some sort of crazed lunatic who posts inappropriate things all over the place, I probably wouldn't want to talk to you on the show. But you're not at all. And they basically you must have been gaining steam in the nomination because they found an excuse to disqualify you then, eh?
That definitely seems to be the preview. I did sit as the vice president of communications for the United Conservative Party back in 2018. That was an elected position by the members of the United Conservative Party. I was vetted at that time in order to be able to run for that position. So I was good enough in 2018, but all of a sudden in 2020, not so much. Disqualification came 5 days after the close of nominations, and they were citing 2 posts back in 2015. So that was eight years ago, well before I ran for vice president of communications. They were one post was in regards to raccoons. That lady had posted a meme in regards to she wanted her raccoons out of her basement. She'd like the exterminator to remove them, get them gone from the house, and that this is why she didn't care whether the exterminator wore a suit or a uniform, so long as he got the raccoons out of her basement. That was in reference to explaining why she didn't care that Trump was not as polished and such, but if he was willing to get the raccoons, the self-serving, blundering politicians, her words, not mine, out of the basement, that's why she would support that person. And I said this was a great idea on my post, and I was told that incites violence against politicians. The other post was in 2015 as well. It was in regards to the silent majority becoming irrelevant. There was a lot of people then, that was during the Benghazi time. There was a lot of speaking tours going on in regards to when people stay silent, then bad things can happen. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Nazi Germany or Afghanistan or the Salem witch trials. 25% of the people are those who believe that things should be different and that they can go about doing them in horrible ways. And the other 75% have to speak up and say, this doesn't represent us. This doesn't say who we are. If they remain silent, then the only thing you get to see is the side that's talking negative and radical and things like that. So I was talking about the fact that the silent majority becomes irrelevant. And I used an example of a professor who had just put out a horrible post about Islam and all these negative things. And I was using it as an example to say, when people remain silent, when the majority of people don't stand up and say, this is wrong, this doesn't represent us, this isn't who we are, that people will put these things out there because that's the only part of it they see. The silent majority actually makes certain things irrelevant and allows bad things to happen. That, they said, was my long-standing history of posting hateful and anti-Muslim items.
Yeah, and so part of that too, usually with a nomination disqualification, they're pretty quiet. I mean, if there's real reasons for it, they'll offer the candidate, just kind of say, look, we're going to quietly say no, and we're not going to go on further about it, and we'll just let you go your way and we'll go ours. But they kind of went out of their way to go after you after this thing.
Yes, I was disqualified on Saturday, and on Monday morning, Mr. Kenney, in a reporter-filled press conference, said that this, there's only 2 of us, so it wasn't like you couldn't tell who he was talking about, that this person, has a long-standing history of this. He certainly went after my good name and character. And and had no qualms about it in a public forum. It's one thing to come talk to me and say you're concerned about this, that this could possibly be a reputational risk. I've never been considered a reputational risk on any board or any committee I've ever sat on. But it's a whole different ballgame to do it in a public place like that without having backed up his statement. He said, I don't know anything about the nominations, there's a vetting process, but then proceeded to slander me directly. That's an interesting way to take it.
Yeah, well, if I recall, I think it was a Western Standard reporter who asked that question at that conference. I could be wrong, but she asked about that. I think it was Amber, and part of it probably is Premier Kenny didn't even want to go into that if he couldn't, if he could avoid it. But it was, I do recall also, as you said, he said he doesn't know anything about it, but then went on at length about all the stuff he knows about it, or claimed to.
That's the thing. I'm thinking this is a good shot with Tim being disqualified and myself within days of one another for very similar items. I think it's a shot across the bow for other people who want to step forth. Those of us who, hardworking Albertans who take the time out to say the status quo isn't doing it for me. I'm willing to challenge the status quo. He's saying, he's going to make sure that you think about this. Are you sure you want to do this? Because it is very possible that you could get your name dragged through the mud. Was the post that I put up the best post? Was it written properly back 8 years ago? I probably could have done more diplomatic writing. Was it the best example to use? Probably not. But those are all hindsight. Did it lift me to the level of candidate disqualification? Absolutely not. I pointed out to the appeals board that I sit on 2 committees that have national security clearance, that in order for me to sit there, and I now have to tick the box that I've been disqualified as a candidate for a political party, because that bar is usually very, very high, which means I could be moved into secondary screening or possibly removed from those committees. This isn't just about, you don't get to run as a challenger. This affects my committee work, my community work, as well as stuff I do on the farm. It's I don't think they take it into real life context exactly what they're doing to those of us who are just stepping up. We're not trying a new socialistic wing. We're simply saying the status quo, we'd like to challenge it. And for them to disqualify us on these weak grounds shows me that they're scared of having new people in there. And I guess Albertans have to ask why. Why is it that the UCP party will not let its members make this decision? I'm sorry, but the nomination process in this moment in time, the way it's been handled with me, I think is a joke. Just to go a little further on that, I phoned all of my references that I listed on my nomination sheet. Would you like to know how many of them were contacted? None. Not one was phoned. Not one. How do you do a nomination when you're not even phoning their references? When you're attacking them about 8-year-old social media posts you just comment great show on? Like this goes beyond interference. This is you're dragging people's good names through the mud for no reason.
It gets onto character assassination. Getting beyond that, though, I guess more to the root of why then that you decided to run against. I believe it was Shao is your incumbent down there. Just why did you feel that his nomination should be challenged?
Well, one of the reasons I felt it was challenged is in my counselor role, I hear from a lot of people that Mr. Schau doesn't get back to them. The MLA is not returning phone calls. He's not returning emails. He's not showing up at events. And I think 4 years of not representing the riding needed to be challenged. It needed somebody to stand up. That is your job as a representative. If you are an MLA in Edmonton, your first and foremost job is to represent the people in your riding. That's what the job's all about. And if you can't return phone calls and you can't return emails and you can't be at places because you're too busy, then you need to adjust. What is it that you have to take off your plate? What is it that you have to maybe hire out? But those of us who are business owners do that, right? On a regular basis. If I can't get to the bookwork, do I need to hire someone to do the bookwork, or do I need to hire someone to go bed the calves? Which is it that comes off that plate? So I just felt that the status quo had to be challenged. And one of the problems was you need a 6 months membership within the UCP party in good standings. You open up a nomination race with only 14 days. how do you meet that qualification? Those nominations should never been opened other than 7 months at minimum, because then you can think about it. You can talk to your family, you can talk to your community and say, do I really want to do this? Do I want to run? And then you've got time to meet those qualifications. But at this moment in time, you've limited it down to a very few number of people who have that. And will they be willing to step forward and go through this? I was one of those people. I've been involved in politics since I was yay high. I was willing to challenge the status quo. Mr. Kenney took a personal swipe at me, but that doesn't mean I'm down and out.
Well, and moving beyond that, I mean, as other people speculate, I mean, both yourself and Mr. Hoven have been working quite hard on your nominations. You've been selling memberships, you've been working the ground, and now there's a whole lot of frustrated, infuriated members who probably, I would think, might not have been willing to spend $99 to drive up to Red Deer and cast a ballot, but now they're feeling more inspired than ever to do so. Like, I just feel this might backfire even more than losing a nomination.
Well, I certainly think it would have been a better idea to let the nomination play out and let people have their say. They're definitely feeling like their say has been taken away from them. They say they're smart people, and I agree. Members are smart people, and they can make the choice as to whether a candidate is good or not. We don't need the party babysitting that to this particular level. So no, you've got some people that are fired up, and I know lots that have said, I wasn't intending to go to Red Deer, but now for sure I am. It's an interesting risk that Mr. Kenney decided to take, interesting risk that the United Conservative Party decided to take, and I guess we'll see how it plays out on April 9th. There's lots of people down here that are saying they're headed to Red Deer. I know a couple buses are headed up that way, so we'll see how it plays out, but they're not happy down here at all.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of I was saying earlier in the show, I mean, nominations are where some of the worst political shenanigans always happen. But I remember, I mean, an incumbent candidate, if you're an incumbent government MLA, typically it's not that hard to maintain support. It's rare when they get unseated in a nomination. If they're just, as you said, returning phone calls, showing up for some town hall meetings and council meetings, even as a backbencher, you're a pretty good chance nobody's going to manage to get up there and unseat you. You know, you can just stay the course. And they made their own bed when they get challenged. We saw that in High River, and I'm forgetting his name. I don't want to go into it anyways, but you see, if he wasn't tight enough with the UCP, I think, as well, so they let it go, and he lost his nomination. But I do know from living up that way, he was a bad MLA as far as that went. He didn't talk to people. He didn't come out. You never heard from him. He was a placeholder, so he lost that chance. And we see this is more than just losing an MLA. It would be politically inconvenient at this time for the government, I think, to be losing some nominations. That's more at the root of it.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
So
definitely to the root of it, that's for sure. The unfortunate thing is you've now taken a beautiful conservative riding like Cardston-Siksika, and you've now made it vulnerable for the next election. You could have anybody come in here right now because people are upset. They were upset that their choice was taken away from them. And they're willing to look elsewhere now. That's scary going into an election in 2023. So this was an interesting poll. You could have slid aside resources to your candidate of your choice if you wanted to, but to disqualify two candidates that are well known in their communities, conservative minded, have sat on multiple committees, government branches, round tables, and disqualify them at this low level going into a leadership review. I'm hoping, that's a risky move because you're walking right into an election and you've made this riding vulnerable. I hate to say it, but people are tired of the government interference.
Well, yeah, well, and I was just talking to Paul Hinman before. He's working on his by-election up in Fort Mac right now. But when you've got somebody like him organizing on your flank, he's a guy that they often underestimate. But if you took Paul in a general election and stuck him down there in the atmosphere in your riding, I got a feeling he could split that vote quite easily in half at the very least.
At the very least.
And just the history of that riding, when Ian Donovan won it in the past, I was on the executive at that time, and there was a massive nomination battle and a lot of hard feelings out of that one. But still, it wasn't any of that dirty play going on like this.
It was a hard battle. I remember that one. There were some hard feelings. However, the MLA that Mr. Donovan, when he took that, he did go back in to heal those items and talk about them, and he didn't sweep them under the rug. That's kind of the difference. It's kind of what what we're asking to try to go back to. My question is why is it that the political leaders of today don't want that to happen? Why don't they want us to have a say?
So I know you're pretty busy now with calving season and everything going on. I'll let you go pretty soon. But I did also just kind of want to ask, where are you going now? What's your plan at this point?
Well, right now, I do have my membership. So I will be headed up April 9th to have my say in regards to Mr. Kenney's leadership. And we'll see how that political landscape kind of plays out. Yeah, I haven't decided where politically I want to go. I do think that the status quo needs to be challenged, and I'm willing to stand up and challenge it. Where that vehicle is, I don't know quite yet. I think we're all kind of waiting on the March 15th, the by-election, and the April 9th leadership review to decide where we're going to kind of park ourselves politically for the next little while.
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot politically in the air in Alberta right now. I got a feeling we're in for some tumultuous times for a while yet to come. I mean, even if Premier Kenney survives the leadership in Red Deer, it's a very divided party and a lot of upset people, and they're not going to give up at that point. So we'll see what happens, but I'll let you get back to those cattle out there. Thank you very much for joining us today to explain that and talk about it. And we'll be up there with our coverage of the Western Standard and Red Deer that weekend. So maybe I'll see you while you're up there.
Awesome. I'll see you there, Corey. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jody. So yes, that was Jody Gateman, who was running for the nomination in Cardston, Siksika. I'm probably missing something on that constituency down there again, but just south of Calgary, down south of Blackie area, and getting all the way down. Used to be Littlebow. And yeah, just to review, she obviously was getting close to winning it. That's part of it too. I mean, the government doesn't mind if somebody just comes out and sells 10 memberships and loses a nomination. They can look like they were paying attention to democracy at that point. But if their candidate actually starts becoming at risk, then they suddenly feel compelled to act. And they went digging, and it's interesting, on shaky ground. I mean, it really was. Jody's not somebody who came out of nowhere. Either is Tim Hoven. I mean, they were both elected in council type positions. They've been vetted before. They didn't have big red flags. Their biggest red flag was that they were threatening an existing candidate, and they could embarrass the premier shortly before a review by dislodging them. I'm kind of more surprised that they went after Jody. With Hoven, I can see it in a sense that Hoven was about to dislodge Kenney's right-hand man. It looked like he might take Nixon out of the race, which would really embarrass the government. But at the same time, I don't know. I've heard estimates that he sold as many as 1,500 memberships. Well, of those 1,500 now, they're ticked off, and they're right next to Red Deer. It's not hard to spend $99, drive out there and cast their ballot and say what they think. But I mean, Kenney was in a rock and a hard place. Also, you lose a senior minister in a nomination, and you look like a weenie as well, and that doesn't help you and make you look stronger on your way into a leadership review. It's just an unholy mess. I don't know how Kenney can pull himself out of it. I know people keep talking about his, and I know it's true, his organizational abilities. He's a smart guy. He's played politics since high school, basically, but he just can't seem to get a grasp on things at this level of politics. He hasn't been able to do it. And that happened with the UCP AGM. That's where Todd Lowe and I had him on. He's talking about getting the RCMP to have a look even, because there were some constitutional changes being put forward to protect the premier and things like that at the AGM. And he lost. Enough people came out to the AGM, that vote lost. So the organizer, as hard as he pushed, all the king's horses and all the king's men, couldn't fix the AGM again. And he's going to have a real problem on April 9th. He said that 50% plus one is enough for him to stay on. But if he came in with 52% in April, that party is going to be ripped to shreds if he doesn't step down. Just ripped to shreds. And it does. The other part is just personal. I mean, the character assassination that was done on Hoven and Gateman. You're doing your political play, guys. You're saving your party, or you think you are, or you're saving the premier. But to take somebody innocent, somebody who was just running in a nomination that you didn't want them to run in, and then to try and smear them as the usual things of racist and this intolerant, all that crap, is unforgivable. And I'm sick of seeing it. It's not helping our province. It's not helping that party. If Notley does win another term, fully lands on the lap of the current government. It's theirs to lose. The last conservative government in Alberta lasted for 47 years? It's once they're in, they can hold it. Well, Kenny's been in 3 years and he's on the brink of losing it. Get it together. And attacking your own members, this isn't going to help you. This isn't going to build the strength that's going to save you. I'm not even talking just about this leadership review, but going into the general election that now is only a year away. And his support numbers, if it was held tomorrow, it looks like Notley would be our premier again. And there's a scary thought. Yeah, so there we go. Nico's brought that up, sworn in April 30th, 2019. And the review is April 9th, 2022 in Red Deer. And there's going to be, I've heard crazy numbers, thousands of people coming out to vote in that review. That's part of how they tried to kind of rig things was, it's not one member, one vote. You can't vote from home. You've got to make quite a commitment. You got to spend $100. You got to take a day off. You got to get all the way out to Red Deer, cast that ballot in person. I think the ballot boxes are only open for 6 or 7 hours. I know from political organizing in the past, it's going to be a gong show. There's going to be huge lineups to vote. There's going to be upset people. There's all completely, well, I don't know. I guess I say it's unnecessary. The only way to avoid it, I guess, would be if Kenny decided to resign, and he clearly doesn't want to. So this is what we're going into. I'm going to talk about our advertiser one more time before we go on to some more stuff here. And it's Bitcoin Well again. I just want to go a little more length into what these guys offer because they're a really good sponsor. And they're partnered with Power ED by Athabasca University. And they've created this free online curriculum about Bitcoin. They call it, what do they call it? Bitcoin Academy. If you go to bitcoinwell.com/learn, you can enroll in it. That's what I mean, that this service, this business is there to facilitate you, get you comfortable involved in digital currencies. Whether it might not be for you, but these guys can lay it out and you can make an informed decision on whether that's the road you want to go down in digital currencies or Bitcoin itself. And they have corporate packages as well. And that's kind of neat. So, here at the Standard, I get a portion of my, and it's voluntary on my part, of course, as an employee. A portion of my check goes into actually a Bitcoin wallet. It's paid in Bitcoin. The rest comes in conventional money to me. And that portion gets matched by the Western Standard. So I get this little side savings of Bitcoin building up in a little side wallet for me there, which is nice. And it's trouble-free. And I don't, it's set it and forget it. And I don't worry about it. So there's corporate packages. Check that out. You might want to do it for your company or ask your boss to do it. And just gives a secondary sort of way to save money. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. And yeah, they're a good service. I'm going to talk briefly about another sponsor. These guys are Unmask. I'm going to do something. This will be the only time you're going to see me wearing a mask in the Western Standard offices. But here we go. I got one of them. They sent me a sample. This is an unmasked mask, these guys. And what it is, it's a mask that's not a mask. It's as thin as humanly possible. As you can see from the pictures on here, it looks like any sort of mask. Now, I know mask mandates have been dropped all over the place. You don't have to wear them all over. But if you're flying, you still got to wear the damn thing. If you got to ride the bus, you still got to wear a mask. There's a whole bunch of circumstances where you do. Well, this is breathable. This is made in the U.S. It's not some Chinese thing. But it's actually, it does feel like you're barely wearing a mask at all. It's not one of those things that is gagging you and your own breath coming back at you. As it says, the most breathable masks on the planet. And if you use the code STANDARD when you order it, you should get some of these in while you can. They've been selling fast. You'll save 20% on them, and they ship them right out to you. You can save 20%. Go to Unmask, and I think their full website's a little bit long. They always do that to me. It's getunmask.ca.com. And I believe there's some links on the Western Standard on their ads on the banners up top. But I'm getting this off anyways. I just don't like the look of a mask on my face. But I can breathe with that on. It's not like your run-of-the-mill masks. There's your way around it. If you're forced to wear a mask, you got to get on a bus. You got to get on a plane. Get yourself one of these things. You might as well be as comfortable as humanly possible. And of course, I always like trying to help people save money. You'll get 20% off of those suckers if you order and put STANDARD as your code. Get it while you can because they've been selling fast because people still have to get them to travel. And it's been a really popular item. So check those guys out. Unmask. It's another sponsor of ours. And there, you've had your one and only time you're going to see me wearing one of those masks on this show. But again, if I have to, it might as well be a comfortable one. Let's have a look in the federal front here. Yes, we got the conservative leadership hopeful, Jean Charest. He says he supports carbon tax. There's not much of a shocker, So he was on Question Period on CTV on Saturday. And he said he supports policy that will bring Alberta, the oil and gas industry, and other provinces to the table to develop policies that we can implement. Look, it's the same old crap. It's like that government doublespeak I was talking about earlier. It's saying that the carbon tax is good for you. It's not. It's not. Carbon taxes are crap. We don't need them. We've had them in BC for years. Again, you can't pretend we haven't tried them. We put them in. They went there for years. Emissions didn't go down. So if you're going to pretend that it brings emissions down, you're lying. It doesn't work. All it does is cost Canadians more, and we can't afford it right now. Jean Charest is going to keep those taxes going. So keep that in mind. Patrick Brown has officially entered the race now. He's the mayor of Brampton. So he's officially, and he was rumored for quite a while, pretty strongly rumored. He just had his name cleared. CTV, I guess, did a terrible smear on him on some things, on some allegations of sexual misconduct, which appears were not true. And no coincidence that he's gotten that legally cleared. Of course, they didn't willingly do it by the sounds of it, but that's behind him now. Now, I don't know if he's a good candidate or not. I don't know that well. He's a bit of a red Tory. He was in the PCs in Ontario. One of the things I do remember as the mayor of Brampton, which was impressive, though, he was one of the first ones calling out the Ontario medical health officer and saying, give us the real numbers on COVID deaths, not who died with COVID, but people who died of COVID. He was actually poking that nest, and not many mayors were doing that, and that's where we have been finding out that the deaths have been inflated by almost 100% because people were, yeah, sure, you had COVID, but you died of a massive heart attack, unrelated, or all sorts of things people passed away from. Patrick Brown was actually pushing into that. But aside from that, he's a pretty red Tory, but the more the merrier, getting on to democracy, getting on to what Jody was talking about. Trust the members, trust people to choose. So I don't think that people like Patrick Brown or Jean Charest shouldn't be allowed to run for the leadership of these parties. Of course they should. Get out there. And I'll give a little bit of credit where it's due in a sense. At least Charest is being honest about supporting a carbon tax. O'Toole lied. He lied right in our faces. He stood at a Canadian Taxpayers Federation poster with his signature on it, promising never to bring in a carbon tax. He didn't even make it a year before he flip-flopped on that. At least Charest is being an honest liberal. I still wouldn't vote for Charest, but I can respect that. And I can respect having a number of different views in a race, as long as they're honest views. And just to pass along, it was going to be during the day, but it's going to be in the evening. I am going to be interviewing Pierre Poilievre. He's going to be on the show. I think that's going to run on Wednesday, but things have been bouncing around all over the place. So that'll be an interesting talk. And I'm going to try and get all these leadership candidates on that I can and get them on for a conversation. As I said, leave it to the members to pick. That's the main thing. Well, you don't have to like them all. Just get them in there. And ones like the, blocking Gateman like they did. And again, what's even worse, though, is kicking dirt on her after the nomination was shut down by like that. Again, nominations have a lot of dirty play going on. And that was as ugly as it gets in both cases. It was very shaky ground. I mean, if it was a true lunatic, even then, I'm a bit more of a democratic-minded person. Like, you think, like, nominations are important. That's how you can vet people. But everybody remembers the Alan Huntsberger thing, and he had his old postings about how gay people were going to burn in a lake of fire and a bunch of vile stuff. It was horrible. I didn't. I was repulsed when I read it, and I was managing a campaign during that election, not his, but one of in that party, and that should have been found. But the problem was with Huntsberger, he never even ran in a nomination. That's when it would have come up. If he'd run in a nomination, if they'd been competing for that riding. The problem was he was a cannon fodder, low-level candidate up at Edmonton in one that the UCP was never going to win anyway, or Wildrose at that time, I should say. But if he'd have run in it, it wouldn't have been that disaster, which hurt the whole party, because I'm sure a competing nomination candidate would have dug into some of that and exposed it. And even then, I'm of a view, you don't kick him out of the nomination when it's at that point. You just expose it and say, come on, people, we don't want this guy representing us, and trust the members. They'll vote so he doesn't end up representing them. Open democracy can work. You got to trust the people and let them do it. The more people there are, the more rational a choice they're going to make. They're typically going to make the right choice. Sure, a large number of people can vote for the wrong person at times too. We got Trudeau over and over again. But on a nomination level, these are engaged people. These are political party people. Let them do their job. Let them pick who's going to represent them. Get out of the way. But we'll see what's going on there. We got a big federal race going on. Let's see. The Liberal media loves their Quebec politicians. Ask Pierre about his relationship with the WF. Okay. Judy and Jim Jirotowski. Actually, just to plug, Poilievre was on with True North Energy. Man, I'm so bad with names. Andrew Lawton. I know Andrew. I shouldn't forget his name. He was on with him, and Andrew asked him about it. And Polyev made it clear in that he has no relationship with them. He hasn't attended any of their things. He's not a part of it. And I'm at a point of believing him. And, I have gone on with the World Economic Forum a number of times and Klaus Schwab. And I do think they're an odious group. I think they've got disgusting goals. I think they are trying to influence our politicians and our countries, and they are looking to bring about a great reset. At the same time, I don't think everybody who's ever gone to one of their functions as a attendee is necessarily under their thumb or in their control. We got to be careful with the guilt by association. These guys invite thousands of people to those conferences cumulatively, and they're always influential thousands of people, but it doesn't mean they've always won their support or gotten control of them or anything just because they even attended one of those things. So there are some people who fully swallow all that crap. I mean, and Justin Trudeau, I think, is one of them. He's spoken at one of their conferences. He didn't just attend, and he's talked about the Great Reset stuff. But with Pierre Poilievre, there's really no solid grounds to say he's at all involved with that thing. So because it was already asked, though, Judy, I'm not going to ask him again because I'd just like to get the fresh ones. And Andrew covered that. I don't know about his net value, Teresa. There's another question, Teresa Hasselow. If you go to one of those sites that talks about celebrity net worths, if you want, you Google Corey Morgan and celebrity net worth. And apparently, I think I'm worth $1.5 million to $5 million. That's what it says on there somewhere. Some person on Twitter came attacking me and put that out at me. Oh, I wish. Guys, I'm not even close. I'm sorry. We're many decimals off on my net worth with these things. So if that's the sort of source where it's coming out of, I don't know if you can necessarily trust it. But yeah, somebody on Twitter saying, "Oh, look at Corey, he's that rich guy who just, he's worth he's worth $5 million." Oh God, no, I'm not, guys. Those websites just make up crap. They really do. But Pierre might have a bunch of money as well. A connection with Bill Gates. I might get to that, but where do you go? I mean, did he meet him once somewhere, or did he? My concerns are going to be at least mostly policy-wise, though I want to be somewhat tough. Patrick Brown was asking him. He came out shooting in his campaign, actually, with saying that Pierre doesn't properly value free religion and things like that. I got to see farther where he's going. He didn't. I don't think he felt Brown opposed Bill 21 enough or some stuff like that. I might ask about a little bit of that stuff. As Nico's been putting it up there, yeah, you can also pass these questions on to me at Corey B. Morgan, and that's the Twitter account, and email is cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com. Nico had that up there earlier. Yeah, send them in. I can't guarantee I'll get those questions. I'll only get 15 minutes with them, but I'll certainly try to get some good ones. I don't want it to be just, more of the usual mushy stuff. We get enough of that. But it's a big, interesting race. And you're saying it was on Wikipedia where that worth was. Okay, I have to look into it. But again, even if his worth is $9 million, the other thing is I don't really think it's, to be blunt, not much of my business. Unless there was some sort of direct correlation to say there was something wrong in how he got it. I've got no issue with somebody if they've got money. I mean, I just don't know. But we'll see. I doubt I'll ask him much about that. Bill C-67, that one is getting into provincial politics, and it's an Ontario issue, and there was a couple of columns we put up, actually. Barbara Kay put one up today. Talk about it. It's essentially a form of critical race theory going into schools, and they put it in that. I might ask a bit about it, but I'm not sure how eager to pull him into a provincial issue. He's looking running for a federal spot. But these are tough questions worth checking into, that's for sure. I mean, immigration is definitely a Roughneck Nation saying, an important topic to broach. Absolutely, that is one. I think Poilievre actually just put out a thing talking about how he wants to fast track certain immigrants and things like that, and I'd like him to flesh that out a little more. I mean, I know with Roughneck Nation there, he's always been outspoken about uncontrolled immigration. I think we have different views on it. I think I'd like to see more immigration, but I do want it to be careful, not just an unfiltered, hey, here's the doors are open, pour on in. But at the same time, I think we get a lot of value with smart immigration policies and bringing people in. But yeah, that's a good one. I do want to talk to him, so thank you for that about immigration while I got him. Getting near the end of things here. One other thing that popped up on the news quickly, basic universal income. That's another good one. And I'll be going pretty soon. So email them if you got more. And again, I can't promise I'll hit them all, but I'll certainly take all of them into consideration. It makes my job easier for my list of questions to hit him with. I just want to shoot it. Tom Brady is back. Hey, is just going totally off topic here, just to break things off for the day on the show. Anyhow, with Tom Brady, the quarterback, greatest of all time. I hate to admit it, and I'm a Steelers fan, but you got to admit, I mean, my God, Tom Brady's he's near my age, and he's still one of the best out there. The bugger. I was kind of happy seeing him finally retire. But the story that came out, so he's after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it was, of saying he's retiring, he changed his mind, so he's back for another couple or a few years. But somebody at an auction bought a football, and I guess it was the last touchdown that Tom Brady ever threw. And they were assuming at this auction that this was going to be the last one ever. This was going to be a noteworthy sports memorabilia football, the last touchdown ever thrown by the greatest quarterback of all time. And he spent $500,000 on that thing. Well, now that Brady's coming back, assuming he scores at least one touchdown on his return, that will no longer be the last touchdown ball thrown by Tom Brady. So what a terrible loss on an investment in short order. Oh, well, I guess if you got $500,000 to spend on a football, I'm sure the guy's got money to burn in some other ways anyways, but that's one of the worst investments in a while. Mike asking, what time's the interview? It's a recorded one. It's going to be a little later tomorrow, and I'm going to run it on Wednesday. It's a part of the problem with the live show is it's difficult to get guests in, at that exact time. So sometimes we got to record them at times, especially during the campaign. Patrick Brown, yeah, I remember that with the Believe in Jesus saying shut down sports facilities, but he and his buddies continue to play hockey. Yeah, I think it was a Rebel cameraman caught him there, or even the Menzoid. I can't remember for sure. So, yes, lots to go over tomorrow. For now, I'm going to try and get another guest for the moment. I got, because initially it was going to be Paul Hinman, but I had to bump it a little later. I do have Drew Barnes coming on, though. And he's the independent MLA for out in Medicine Hat. He wrote a column that's on the westernstandardonline.com. And actually, he's kind of been a bit critical of Paul Hinman on perhaps Paul's choice to run in that by-election up in Fort McMurray there. So it'll be interesting to talk to Drew and why he thinks that might not be a good idea or is. So that'll be a good conversation. And what else? Okay, ask him to denounce he already denounced the WEF basically in the other interview, Timothy. I don't want to get repetitive. I only get these guys so often. As I said, Lawton covered it quite well. Arts organizations who get Alberta Foundation arts money. I'll have a look into that. Arts Foundation, I will write that. For something else as a story. All right, but I think I've kind of covered it for today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in on this Monday with our crazy move and everything else going on. Thank you to the other fella for enduring my bad hair and the tie that's not to his taste. But hey, keep subscribing, guys. We're going to get a hair and makeup person in here pretty soon in wardrobe, and I'll look a lot prettier for you in future shows. In the meantime, you got to deal with my poor coordination, and well, this is the hair I've still got. So you all have a good day. Thank you all again for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow at the same time at 11:30.